Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody, today a quick bonus video in which I'm going to be telling you why now could be the perfect moment to pick yourself up an example of one of the greatest performance saloons of the last decade, the Alfa Romeo Giulia Quadrifoglio. But last time I drove one of these, I said, you want it, but you shouldn't buy it. What's changed? Well, find out in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars. Kinda hard to believe, but the Giulia Quad has been with us now for near a decade. Introduced in 2015, and the fact is, even at launch, this was a car that seemed a little bit out of time, because back then, the saloon was already a dying breed, being replaced every day with a series of faceless crossovers and SUVs. For a manufacturer like Alfa Romeo, which at that point hadn't actually built a saloon for a few years, to then commit to not just a new one, but a new one with proper old school underpinnings, rear-wheel drive, was an absolute delight. It was manna from heaven for us petrol heads. And when they then told us they were going to be building a proper fire-breathing hot version, well, you could hear heads exploding and bottles being dropped from 100 paces, because this was something to get really excited about. And then when it landed, we got even more excited because we saw this was a properly good-looking car too. And you know, true style, when 10 years after a car is launched, it still looks new. And I believe that is because Alfa Romeo stuck to the time-honoured principles of correct shape and proportions without too much frippery. Modern performance cars have got way too much going on, and I think they're going to date rather badly. There is a reason that you can look at, say, a Jaguar or an Aston Martin of 25 years ago and it still look pretty, but you could look at something else from 5 years ago and it looks a little bit ungainly. This, to my eyes, is just about perfect. In fact, the only criticism that I could level at this car is the fact that it did look a little bit too much like the regular Giulia, which actually came after. But open the door and, though yes, the interior was never going to be anywhere near as good as an Audi, BMW or Mercedes, it was certainly a big step up over the old Giulietta and the Mito, which at that point were the mainstay of the Alfa Romeo lineup. And just to tease us even further, Alfa were keen to point out that the main man behind this was also the chap behind the 458 Speziale. So to say expectations were sky high is nothing of an understatement. And then, when the car arrived, it achieved the impossible. Those expectations were met. And yeah, sure, in spite of lashings of carbon fibre, this car wasn't the lightest in its class as Alfa claim. Italian scales have always been a bit optimistic. To give you some idea, I once stood on Alfa Romeo scales and it said I weighed 6 stone. But regardless, that thunderous 2.9 litre 90-degree V6 up front, Alfa were keen to tell us was definitely not 75% of a Ferrari California's T engine, which meant it definitely was 75% of a California's T engine, and it was a barnstormer. Not sonorous, but it definitely did the business. Now, don't forget, if you are going to pick yourself up an old Alfa Romeo, make sure to use CarVertical, the super-powered super search that cross-references a number of databases from around the globe to give you all the information you want to know on any potential used car purchase, including mileage discrepancies, involvement in fire, theft, accidents, and if it's got outstanding finance or is an import. It takes just 60 seconds, and for 20% off the service, don't forget to use my discount code, JayEmm. And though I have driven now a number of Giulias over the years, I've got to say, not a single one of them has ever felt slow. In fact, I think these are one of the few cars I would genuinely call a four-seater sports car. And that is because there have been plenty of other cars out there that might claim the title, Maserati Quattroporte for example, but the reality is, for the most part, they're just very nice, very competent saloon cars with a lot of go in them. This has a very different attitude about it. Allow me to demonstrate. This thing, it's got some serious go in it, that Ferrari-like razor-sharp steering and suspension which here actually works far better than just about anywhere else that I've driven one of these. Today I'm up in Scotland, and the reason I say this is a bit of a bonus video is because until this morning I didn't know I was going to make it. That's why the car doesn't look particularly prepped for camera, but I am eternally grateful to its owner Scott nonetheless. He has come out today with a couple of petrolhead chums, George of many previous JayEmm videos, Cal, who currently owns both my old Maserati Quattroporte and my Aston Martin DB9, and his friend Gary. We're up here in this, a Lamborghini Huracan Starato and a Renault Sport Megane Trophy R. Originally, I was supposed to be filming something else as well, but that went a little bit wrong. More on that in a separate video. However, as this was about and the offer was there, I said, you know what? I'd love to drive one of these, because it's been, I think, at least a couple of years since I've got behind the wheel, and I've never had the chance to drive it somewhere like here. And up in the Highlands, we've got a very different kind of road to what I'm used to down in East Anglia. There, things are generally more tight, technical, twisty, and demanding. And it's not that you don't get that up here, but we certainly don't get this kind of stuff. And the Giulia is loving it. In fact, ordinarily, as soon as I can, I try and put this car in its dynamic mode, but with the dampers backed off into sport. This, unlike a Ferrari, can only ever put the dampers one setting back. Nonetheless though, even the mid setting is actually quite well judged here, and this thing can carry some serious pace. Visibility is also pretty decent, though the B-pillar is fairly chunky, and for a normal, everyday saloon car, which is what Scott uses it for, it does the job okay. My major criticism being the fact that the rear is a little bit dark. Unfortunately, Alfa Romeo, I think fairly early on, just ditched any of the interesting interior options, leaving you with just black leather and dark headlining. No sunroof option available, and that means it's not very nice. In fact, I once went out with my partner and a couple of friends, and they all said they never wanted to go out in the car ever again. And that's because if you are on roads a little bit bumpier than these, it's a pretty jittery thing, and the rear does feel a bit claustrophobic. And that's one reason I've never really said to people, this is a car you should actually buy. The other has to do with the way that the traction control system works. You see, these cars have lots of power and torque, 510 horses and 443 pounds-feet, or 600 Newton meters. But Alfa Romeo, by default, really peg it back in both first and second. How bad is it? Well, allow me to demonstrate. I'm sure most of you have pinned your car in first, and I'm sure some of you have pinned a car with 500 horsepower and rear-wheel drive in first. It should be a fairly leery affair. Allow me to do it in the Alfa. I'm in dynamic mode. I'm going to slow it right down. Okay, and here we go. That's it, that's full beans. There's 30, and there's 60. If I want the full effect in first and second, I have to put the car into race. Problem is, when I do that, traction control is off. Not halfway off, not a little bit loosened off, just off. And am I going to drive a car with 500 horsepower and rear-wheel drive with no traction control whatsoever? No, not when it's not mine. And this one doesn't have 510 horsepower. This one has 600. It's rampant. Though in all honesty, the regular car isn't exactly slow, and had I not been told this car has more power than standard, I wouldn't have noticed. The truth is, the real disappointment has never been the way that this car goes. Instead, it's the way that it sounds. That's just not a nice noise, is it? I know there are those that disagree with me, but the fact is, a 90-degree V6 is an odd thing. And it doesn't sound happy, does it? I mean, it's workmanlike, and the response is pretty good too. There's about half a second of lag, and then it just throws you to the horizon. But doesn't sing. Certainly not like an old Busso does. In spite of all that though, this is a car that today, as much as any time I've ever driven it, is one that when you find yourself in the right mood, can truly ascend to greatness. This has an interactivity to it, an excitement. Yes, imperfection too. The brake-by-wire system, I've never been fond of. It just doesn't work that well. But the whole thing comes together and it's magical, and it still looks good. But what's changed over the last couple of years? Well, Alfa have facelifted the car. They've made a few changes over the years, updated the infotainment, made it a little bit better, and the early cars were strict 4-seaters. This is a 5-seater, and I think the rears now fold down too. But the main difference is they have finally started to properly depreciate. They were always expensive cars to buy when new, over £70,000, and they've only gone up. But for a long time, they also refused to depreciate that much. And I think this is partly because they were caught in this weird thing that every car found itself in the sort of early 2020s. So a couple of years ago, when I last looked at one of these as a potential daily, the cheapest out there was still about £40,000. Now, the cheapest out there is about £30,000. They've even been fairly reliable, and I'm sure they've got problems, but the fact is, I don't tend to hear of them. What I do hear about more is how useless Alfa Romeo dealers are, and that's sad, but now they're of an age where you just wouldn't bother taking it to a main dealer unless it was still in warranty. You'd just take it to your local Alfa Romeo specialist. I'm sure they can look after it. In fact, you might even find your local Ferrari or Maserati guy can, and they might charge less than Alfa Romeo main dealer prices too. And the other thing which has changed, well, FCA is gone, Stellantis is in, and we know now that we are never ever to see the likes of this car again. Instead, they're back to building soulless, horrible stuff like the Giulia and the Tonale. Hideous cars. I've driven a Tonale. It's one of the worst cars I ever drove. It's so bad, in fact, that Alfa Romeo's press department won't let me tell you how bad it is. This, though, yeah, it's flawed. It's got problems. I hate the brake-by-wire system. The steering can be a little oversensitive sometimes, and it hasn't got the most feel. It's also thirsty too, if you're having fun, but then so are most things with 500 horsepower. However, it's genuinely usable, provided you're willing to put up with what it is, and it's certainly fun. It's also a little bit different, it's definitely special, and we know now we're never to see its like again. And people are forever coming to me asking advice on which car to buy as an investment. Well, let me tell you now, if you want a recipe for a place to put your money that's going to be safe, that's it. So the Giulia Quadrifoglio, if you've been thinking about it, do it now, because they won't be around forever. And I can tell you something, the day production stops on these, the prices are going up. So, there we have it. That's a quick little video from me. Big thanks to Scott for bringing this car out and helping film today. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.